Hello and welcome everyone to Kids for Ransom, the podcast where we expose the flaws, corruption, and systematic failures of the modern family court system.
We're just two everyday dads fighting for our kids and speaking out for parents across the country who are struggling to stay connected to their children.
In every episode, we'll dig into the real world scenarios, court documents, and personal stories that show us how the system is broken and how it's being used to hold our children hostage in legal battles that too often serve money and power, not families or justice.
We'll also break down the laws, policies, and court procedures that are being misused and or misunderstood, and we'll share the hard-earned lessons we've learned along the way.
Just to be clear, nothing we share should be taken as legal advice. We're not lawyers. We're parents, and we're here to inform, educate, bring awareness to the reality that too many families are facing.
If you'd like to follow our journey, hit that thumbs up and subscribe and hit that ping notification bell. Families are being broken in silence. It's time to pull back the curtain on family court and stand with parents and children being held for ransom.
There's a lot to talk about on this particular subject matter because I think that we both have had that experience with the courts, right? And the way that they just we like to call railroading. I mean, they just railroad you into like taking advantage of every bit of your rights that they possibly can, and then think that they can do this because there's not going to be any accountability. Um, and
And
so,
here's the thing, when we first started this, when you go into these family courts, you don't know what your rights are. That's the problem.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so, it could take, even when you have an attorney, you think that maybe you're protected, that they're going to protect your rights. But in my experience, having an attorney isn't going to do a whole lot. I think most of the attorneys probably could do more damage than they can do good sometimes. Um, and
right.
certainly, in my experience, I started to question their loyalty. Was their loyalty to me as their client, or was it to the court or the way the system generally operates and kind of trying to keep everything status quo? Kind of sometimes it seems like that's their goal, not necessarily to their client.
Yeah, very much so. Because they get incentive to drive the case longer. And as long as they can keep kicking the can down the road, so to speak, and they're getting more and more of their legal fees, paid. And there's different processes where they know that it takes time for another service of the court to accomplish before there's any kind of you know anything resolved with the case. It can't really move forward without having now another party involved, such as like a child evaluator, a child psychologist, hell, even those the guardian ad litem, but then just as well as the um, minors counsel.
Yeah.
We got a new law that actually came through on about those two, by the way, this year. We could touch base on that a little later, but that was interesting. But it's not like a huge change. It's not doing anything really. I don't think for parents going through this crap with the court. But it just raises opportunities for objections, and um, I think that really just kind of can empower the attorneys really to throw out now other arguments that may just drag the case out or something. But
Yeah,
yeah,
they definitely don't seem to have an incentive to get quick results,
right.
because their paycheck stops as soon as they do that,
Yeah,
you
well
know.
put. Yeah, well put.
So,
There's
um,
no incentive for them to finish this up quickly.
yeah, but like I was saying, we don't know our rights going in. It wasn't really until I got rid of the attorney after about a year and a half, I think it was almost 2 years, and I started doing, research and represent myself and trying to learn. You start to learn how I say how broken the system is, but sometimes it's almost like this is how it was just designed to operate. Um, the judges, they use this preponderance of evidence standard, which is the lowest evidentiary standard they use in civil courts, and despite the name preponderance of evidence, in my experience, it seems like some of these judges don't think they do need evidence because they make rulings that hurt the children, that sabotage the relationship with one of the parents, that that blatantly invade on their natural rights as a parent and many other constitutional rights. Um, and they do so without any evidence, despite a preponderance of evidence being the evidentiary standard. So that's the biggest way that they seem to abuse, in my experience, their discretion, because they have a lot of discretion in these courts. It seems like almost every topic they have some level of discretion, and that's certainly a dangerous amount of power to give anyone. So, but yeah, if they would just make orders based off of clear evidence, but there doesn't need to be any evidence, in my experience, in these family courts, and that's a dangerous situation to put anyone in if the other person is willing to be malicious with their accusations and they're willing to lie.
Yeah, and also let's just announce this because this is the interesting thing is like so I'm in South California, whereas Sam, you're in another location, and we want to
Yeah, up
address
in Northern
the
California.
location or just the north or
Yeah,
middle, whatever.
and California is definitely one of the bad family court system for fathers. That's definitely well known.
Well, just mention how I mean, there's a few of us, right? And we're all scattered in
Yes.
different places of California, and yet this same trend is going on in each one of those courts, and that I mean, this abuse of discretion and being able to just, like you said, just simply say something, and then all of a sudden it becomes engraved in stone by the judge, or I should say the record,
Yeah.
and that's yeah.
Yes.
So like that goes into one of the tabs there was the preponderance of evidence standard. I mean, I think we've definitely know how much BS that is. Um, yeah, I
It's certainly abused, no doubt about it. Um,
yeah, because
especially when you take into account that this is people's families, this is their children. A lot of these courts will take away constitutional rights based on accusations in these courts. So there's a lot at stake here.
yeah,
I mean, we're supposed to live in a free society, but if you can't protect your children, how free are we living?
but
When
yeah,
someone can make
exactly.
false allegations and they're going to hurt your children, they're going to take away your freedom, your liberty, take away potentially your relationship with your children, or just greatly restrict it at times. Um, so to use such a low evidentiary standard when the costs are so high
Yep.
is it's concerning.
The costs are detrimental, and
Yeah,
here we are, the damage isn't just like, oh, the child's emotional mental state, let alone maybe the other parent like us, that separation, there's like our emotional and psychological damage, but the financial damage, I don't care where you go. If you're doing this pro per self litigated, or that you're going through an attorney, all of those are actually costing money. It doesn't matter. At some point, you're paying something, right? Those who can get onto the fee waiver, they're still in some way. You're even still getting paid, paying into the system in one way or another. You're having to do that. But that's kind of where this thing is like, whoa, man, we are talking about, you're really taking somebody's life away. It's like you're pretty stagnant. You're not
yeah,
gonna you're not gonna succeed like much further or tremendously further in life when you're going through this and you're dedicated to wanting to be with your child, it's not going to happen. Too much, it's time consuming, stressful, and you're obligated to time deadlines. You're stuck. You're
Yeah,
stuck.
no, that's a great point. This it absolutely consumes you, and it seems like at times, very consistently, that it's almost like the system is designed to financially break you. It's almost like they want you to give up fighting for your children, just pay them whatever they're asking for child support, because of course, when they withhold your children, time with your children, that greatly increases the amount of child support you pay. And
That's
anyone that's done any research has, certainly found out that the states are making a lot of money by collecting child support through grants from the federal government. So, there's in my opinion, kind of a conflict of interest here. Where these courts are supposed to come in and make these rulings to protect people's rights, to make rulings in the best interest of the child. That's a nice little gaslighting phrase they use all the time.
right.
And but at the same time, they're not a neutral third party. They're here making, California makes billions with a B, billions of dollars a year
Billions.
grants from
Yeah.
the federal government for enforcing Title 40 and 4E and collecting child support. They do it in a very predatory manner. Um,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
like I said, it's like they really want you to, they want you homeless. They want you to give up fighting for your kid and just pay them whatever they say. Um, So yes, back to that original point. The fact that the consequences are so high, but yet they're using the lowest evidentiary standard there is, and
Yeah,
and
and you know,
on top of that, it's they're not even following that lowest evidentiary standard to uh to how it's intended to be applied. Because they're making rulings once again without evidence.
right, exactly. Without evidence, uh, the process to which you do have to have evidence into court. One of those being though, and this is important for anybody who's going into court self-represented, and hopefully, if you do have an attorney, that you really are putting them in check because you are going to have to babysit your attorney because they're not going to. You don't count on them to take care of to step up to the plate and do all the right things, the right procedures in court. But that thing about when you want your evidence presented in court is actually telling the judge that you want to, like to present evidence and you want to be able to put it on the record. Um, so it's more of making sure that they know that. But the it's so funny because you could still put all this evidence in there that you have, but yet still it doesn't matter because it's whatever that judge's biasness is, they're going to basically use that as the weight to their preponderance.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely it's certainly what they choose to believe. I've noticed.
Yeah.
And certain, to be fair, certain judges are better than others. That's one of the big problems is these
Uh,
judges are not all created equal.
yeah.
Just in the one courthouse that, I've been dealing with this for the last few years, some of the judges seem like they generally were trying to be fair and follow the law. Other ones, it's like they have such a big ego that like, don't you dare challenge anything they say. Don't you
Yeah.
dare exercise any constitutional rights in this small civil court
Uh-huh.
because they don't recognize
Uh-huh.
it. And some of them have made that blatantly clear. Due process seems to be something they don't recognize many times, in my experience. And and that creates a situation where people are at a legal disadvantage to getting a fair ruling.
Yeah, and I want to just add to that what you said there because I think this will be something that'll be added into the link that anyone who might be watching would be able to see a particular journalist named Susan Bassey. She covers a lot of these in California based on judges who are doing this very thing. They're backdoor deals. They're corrupt. They literally are like abusing the court system and they're using it as their own profiteering type of mechanism, and she exposes them. So it's good that you mentioned that because Susan Vassy being one of those that will actually show in a lot of her videos, or she's got, journals, she's got a website, and exposes these judges that are doing exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
and unfortunately, she's the only one that seems to be doing this kind of investigative journalism anymore. At least when it comes to the family courts, especially, no one is
yeah.
working to expose any of the corruption or fraud or the wrongdoings that are happening in these courts. And it's like you said, the backdoor deals. That's the phrase right there. There's too many times where you hear some of these people's stories, and the only explanation that makes sense is that there was some kind of backdoor deal. Because some of these
Yeah.
situations you hear about, they're so out of left field as far as the rulings that they make in certain situations.
Well, and I just recently found out. I mean, I talked to another guy the other day ago about how there was a particular attorney who told him that he was going to contact the judge's quarters, so had called there through a direct line, which, I mean, that's not, I think that that's like not even like, that's not even legal, where you have an attorney who has a direct line to the judge to actually have a discussion, yet we, the people, do not have a direct contact with the judge in person. We have to only go through their courtroom clerk, possibly the business office. They're only avenues. You're not going to get through to the judge in any other way. And it's preposterous to think that here's, attorneys get this attorney privilege thing where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now they can go and discuss what they want. And that just signifies that, well, there's an opportunity for a backdoor deal right there. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what the law is in regards to that, but
Right.
it,
Yeah.
it, it certainly would be concerning if attorneys have that privilege that a pro per litigant doesn't.
Well, I'm gonna look
That
that.
alone is creating an opportunity for one side to have an advantage for sure.
Hmm. Well, we could actually try to see about this right now. I'm kind of curious because, I mean, I could always talk about that in another video, but this is actually interesting. We can always look this up here. California law prevent an attorney, right, from con what are they contacting directly a judge direct. Let's see what that has to say. Interesting that be. Let's say, let's see that going on. Yes, California law prohibits attorneys from contacting a judge directly, to make any type of deals, and especially a matter of that is contested. This prohibition is outlined in Rule 3.5 of the California Rules of Professional Conduct, which governs contact with judges, officials, employees, and jurors. So it looks like the Rule 3.5, Section B, explicitly states that unless permitted by law and an applicable code of conduct of judicial ethics, a rule or ruling of a tribunal or a court order, a lawyer shall not directly or indirectly communicate with or argue to a judge or judicial officer upon the merits of a contested matter pending before the judge or judicial officer, except only in the open court, with the consent of all counsel and unrepresented parties in the matter.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And,
In a,
we also have California Rules of Court 5.170.
uh,
Parties seeking to communicate with the court outside the presence of the other party must follow specific procedures, usually involving formal ex parte applications with proper notice and service. So,
uh,
it looks like there's a handful of other ones that would certainly reference the legality of having direct contact with the judge in your case.
yeah. there's also another one that said something about in writing, with a copy, therefore furnished to all other counsel. Basically all parties have to know that this communication's happening. So anything outside of that is, a violation of the California Rules of Court,
Yeah.
and what you said, could apply. Uh, so yeah, I mean, this is a complete and utter corruption.
Yeah, that seems to be the case, at least in some situations. I certainly can't paint, not every situation's the same. Um, you brought up Susan Bassi earlier. One issue that I've noticed she's been pushing for is recording in these courts, and the fact that you're not allowed to record in these courts. There's supposed to be public
Yeah,
hearings. All the case files is all public information. Anyone can go look up and see what happened in Paul or Sam's family court case with just a little bit of digging. So it's all public information, but yet they don't allow recordings in the courtroom. And something that I found interesting, I had zero court experience before family court. I have zero criminal record. I've never had to go to
yeah,
court for anything.
yeah.
And so something that was really kind of surprising after getting into it for a couple of years is that, we have these hearings, which is, 15 to 20 minutes max, it seems like. And then
Right.
sometimes you can go up to the longer trials, maybe half day, one day or more. And there's zero documentation. There's no court reporter ever there. That's something you might see on television shows or other, court or legal shows.
Yeah.
Um, but not once was there ever a court reporter there. And it took me a while before I kind of started doing some digging on that. And there's no court and the state, they're not obligated in any way to provide a court reporter. And so one thing, when I took over my case and got rid of the attorney was how do I create a clear record or clear documentation of what's the arguments that are being made, what's being put on the record, what's being said, and what they're basing these orders off of or these rulings off of.
Uh-huh.
And because at some point you start doing the research and you realize that there's some situations where they're not really following the law, and so you need documentation of that. So
Yeah.
I remember when I first started looking into court reporters, just the private court reporters, and it was like $500 to $1,000
Oh yeah,
just for
bro.
them to show up. And then,
Oh
and
yeah,
then
bro.
if you have a 1 day trial, you're probably looking at another $1,000 to $2,000 for a transcript on top of that. And
Oh
that's just
yeah.
one day, one matter, one day, one order.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I think we could both vouch for that, right? I mean, I've definitely
yeah,
had to pay my fair share of fees on that stuff, right? And I
we
don't know,
probably both
my
have.
best deal was like $550 for a half of a day, you know,
Yeah,
and then it was $1,100 for the entire day to have a court reporter there, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think what your situation was, I don't what they charged you.
Yeah. It is, for the private court reporters, it's the same. And that's something that was different between ours is my courthouse has in-house court reporters
Uh,
that they're available for the people that have a fee waiver or people that don't. And their
uh,
prices are a lot cheaper. Even if you don't have a fee waiver, the prices are a lot cheaper than your run-of-the-mill private court reporters. You don't have access to that down there.
no, I don't have access to any of that. I mean, we do have, okay, so, you know, here, I live in San Diego. So in San Diego, there is actually uh, this court reporter that is on staff with the court. But mind you, one, in order to request for this court reporter, you do have to be on a fee waiver. If you get a fee waiver, they do not guarantee that that court reporter will in fact come to your hearing. You will get notified, I don't know, just before the hearing if you're going to actually get your court reporter to show up. That's the only stipulation with the courts here, is that you basically only have if they're available, and you have to have a fee waiver in order to do it. We cannot pay them to go there. We have no means to, like, pay anybody within the court to come and do a hearing. It's all private. Everything's private. as far as paying anybody.
Yeah.
And then there's the court reporter's transcript. And I mean, damn, that's also pretty up there.
Yeah, absolutely. It is and this is all on top of the normal fees for just filing a motion.
Yes,
You want to
yeah,
go file a motion, it's a few $100s. Um, and if you have a parent on the other side that, wants to incite conflict and doesn't want to co-parent, and they just
yeah,
want to push every little tiny matter through the court, which is certainly my situation,
yeah, mine too.
um, that's going to make it to where it's an impossible cost to bear, you know.
Yeah,
And and
yeah,
and while they're coming after, maybe 40% of your income at the same time, it's
uh, if
it
they,
certainly seems like they're trying to chop your legs out from underneath.
yeah, very, very much so. Trying to make it impossible. And going back to that, as like another guy I spoke with, it seems like the different courts within California are also doing even their fees different. So
Yes.
here in my county, I can go and get an ex parte hearing. That's going to cost me $80 to get that hearing. And or I should say that's for the RFO. But there's also an additional for just the ex parte hearing. Okay. Then I'm hearing over into another part of California that it's like $300 to file for an ex parte. That was astounding. I did not know this. I just recently, heard about this. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, is it anything remotely like that where you're at?
I don't know the cost for an ex parte. I haven't really had to do too much. We did one
Oh,
early on in my case,
okay.
but that was when my attorney was when I had an attorney, and
Yeah,
that was as soon as mom essentially realized that I was not, I was kind of our relationship was past the point of being able to be repaired. She
yeah,
took off with my daughter and just cut off all communications, wouldn't let me see her unless they were on her terms. I had to go to her family members' houses. I couldn't take her anywhere. And so as soon as that started, that's when my attorney filed an ex parte to try to deal with deal with it in a more timely fashion.
yeah.
So I certainly can't comment on the cost for my particular court there.
Okay.
Um, you think it would be pretty
Well,
standard throughout the state, though.
I know you think it'd be standard, right? And I'm finding now it's different. And that's
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. It's just crazy. And essentially, I think essentially everything that I file is going to be $80, except for the ex parte.
yeah,
Doesn't matter. But and I kind of thought that this was also interesting. Um, is when we're talking about the court reporters and such, and then there's like no recordings that can happen in the courtrooms. Well, I mean, I want to bring this up because you actually get to have video recording in every other court but our family court. They have video recordings for, and just like DCSS hearings, we have court reporters for those. Those are given to us for DCSS. But the family court division of basically child custody and all of that, no, we don't get that. But it's interesting that only in child support, I'll say that. Only in child support hearings through DCSS do they provide actually court reporters. I'm like, what? This is crazy, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're getting taken away from parenting time of your child. That right there is pulling child support. And
yeah,
why does a child support court care about documenting when they know, well, this all has to be handled over here in your custody matter, you know? And you could argue all day long about what's happening in the child custody arrangements, but that does not get heard in a DCSS hearing. so they completely separate your problems that you have with the mother or the father in that situation. You don't get to talk about it. If there's a money issue, the money issue has to just be only based off of, okay, well, whatever, what somebody's income wasn't correct, and this somebody reported this time incorrect. That's all. you know
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
interesting that I wanted to go back, is the appellate court, like I said, I think I've talked to you this before, is that you can get a full recording of an appeal hearing. They record every single one of them every single day. They got them tracked all the way like 3 months worth. You can go onto their website and download every single hearing that's even on there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yet the family courts, the one that's the lower ones, they're the peons, right? Because you got the appellate court, but the peons, they can't have what, video recording in their hearings? I mean, that's absurd. That's absurd. I talked with an old attorney sometime back last year. He asked me to go to my court and ask for the video surveillance of the courtroom for a day I was in court. I said, that's absurd. Like, I mean, they don't have any video recording. Well, they're supposed to record every single hearing, and they're supposed to have it on a database, and you can subpoena that. Well, here I'm actually continuously going to the court to request this type of thing, and they're just, nah, that doesn't exist. No, there's absolutely no recording. And you got to question this, Sam. There's got to be one type of recording going on in there, because that's a
Well,
liability. Isn't that a security risk? Like, say I brought in a weapon that I was able to sneak through their scanners, and I'm able to actually bring it into the courtroom, and I kill the freaking sheriff. I go and kill somebody else, maybe the petitioner. Dude, there's got to be a security. There's got to be a camera footage of this going on, because then you got nothing in there. What, just witnesses only? If it ever
yeah.
went to that duress extremes, and you've seen videos on YouTube or whatnot that have shown there's been litigants that have attacked judges.
Oh
It's
yeah, we've seen the videos. Yeah, they're out
I
there.
I cheer it all day long, but that's just me. But yeah, man, they're like diving over the freaking counter, blasting the freaking judge in the face. Somebody who mutilated one with a machine gun. I mean, come on, you
Yeah.
gonna tell me that they don't have video recording in that damn courtroom?
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to believe. A couple things on that topic there.
Yeah.
Um, it looks like I look at the ceiling while I'm in there, and it looks like there's what would be cameras up there. I don't know.
Okay.
Clearly, I don't work there. I'm not on the inside. I don't know
Yeah.
if those are cameras, if they're recording or anything like that. Clearly, those are not made accessible to us, it seems like.
Right.
It's interesting you bring this up though, because the other day, actually, I have an appeal, two appeals here going in the appellate court over some trial rulings that were improper, and one of them, the judge put some language in the order describing my behavior throughout the day
Yeah.
not true,
Yeah.
and B,
Ah,
completely outside of the scope of their responsibility of a judge, to give
yeah.
their interpretation of me.
Yeah.
That's
Railroading.
not
That's
law.
railroading, my friend.
So yeah, so there, and of course, mom's attorney has used that language to try to remind every single judge that I'm some dangerous, horrible
Yeah.
domestic abuser.
Yeah.
And so the other day, just out of curiosity, I did a public records request for with the Sacramento Sheriff's Department
Yeah.
to see if I can get the body camera footage.
Yeah.
It was a 1 day trial, and
Of the hearing?
for the hearing, yeah, yeah.
Ah,
So I don't know how it's
knock
going
out
to
of the
work
park,
out.
man. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know how it's going to work, if they're going to give it to me, if
Well,
anything, but I figured it's worth a try. We got to find ways to push back on some of
well,
this conduct from the court here.
well,
Um,
I think we could, yeah, I think we could actually talk about that sometime. Because I think I might have a way for you to go about that. It'll still take a little work, but yeah, I think I have a way to go about that. But that's good. I'm glad you took that step, because that's actually a little that's going to be some good information, for us, our viewers, everybody, to know what that is about and what the
Yeah.
results of that are, because you know this goes back to the whole abuse of discretion, but there's the abuse of the court administration as well. I mean, I wasn't going to touch base on this, but I think it kind of applies when you got a judge doing abuse of discretion, but then you also got the court itself as like the business. So, like their business office services within there are abusing their position as well. Um, and so while you go on requesting that from the sheriffs, I mean, there's without a doubt they're in cahoots with the court, right? The sheriffs are definitely in cahoots with the court.
Well, I don't know if I'd say they're in cahoots. I think that it's how do I describe it? I think don't get me wrong, there's a little bit of bitterness towards these peace officers, these bailiffs.
Uh,
They obviously took an oath to uphold the Constitution,
yeah.
just like the judges did.
Uh,
But they sit there every single day watching watching that get violated daily. Um, and I guess it makes me wonder how conscious they are to what's actually legally happening there, how much they actually understand.
yeah.
Clearly, a police officer did not go to the same level of legal education that an attorney or a judge would.
Right. It's
But
different.
still, they have to see it. They have to see it at least at times. Um,
Well,
as far
it
as
goes back to once again Susan Bessie. She did a nice little interview on some sheriffs up in Palto Palto Valley. What's it called? Silicon Valley, basically.
yeah,
That area right there. Yeah, like these sheriffs, like they even, they expressed how they felt when they were watching these hearings in the courts, and they felt like that didn't sound like it was legal. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
have to dig that one up again.
I, I was just about to bring up Susan Bassey. There's a story she put out here. I don't know how long ago it was, maybe a few months ago, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully I'm remembering this right. It was about someone who got an ADA waiver or an ADA exemption in these
Oh,
family courts. If I recall, it was due to the 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 stress and anxiety, the PTSD, I think is the way they worded it, from the
ah,
abuse from these judges and from opposing counsel.
okay.
Which is, man, in my experience, that's not something to joke about. The what they're doing to people, taking away their rights to see their children, is nothing to laugh about here. And so they granted this person an exemption that allowed them to record the proceedings that they were involved in.
Oh yeah.
And the interesting thing is the court granted it, but they put an exemption in there that said they could
Can't.
not use that recording to prove basically that the judge has done anything illegal.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Well,
I
if you're
remember that.
following the law, why would you need to put that exemption in there?
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Well,
it's
they couldn't use it for the case even. They couldn't use it for the case in terms of like testimony. From my understanding, at least, we could always go back over that again, but I
yeah,
also kind of understood it like they couldn't use it as evidence, basically.
sure.
I think that's what I understood with that video.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was something along the lines of that. But it's just the fact that
yeah.
they did specify, if I'm not mistaken, that it was they could not use it to prove any kind of judicial wrongdoing, basically the judge doing anything illegal that doesn't follow the law. And it's like, well, if you're following the letter of the law and making legal
Yeah.
rulings, why would you need to make an
Why would you
order
need
like
to? Yeah.
that? Yes,
Yeah.
it almost
Simple
makes
and
you
plain.
wonder if they're very clearly aware of how they're conducting themselves and uh, where that falls in line with the letter of the law.
Yeah. I don't know. But some needs to change. Yeah,
Yeah.
we obviously we got some good stories for we probably want to shout out there. Definitely go look into research is those stories of Robert Garza, those stories of Mark Ludwig. These stories, Mark Escobar, I guess he's got an interesting story. Um, I think these are worth mentioning. We know there's all these different channels out there on the Facebook groups that can testify to these types of things, and yeah, I think that honestly everybody should be at least at some point in the day getting onto a hearing and just watching one that is a custody issue, not the crap about divorce and the
Well, that's
dissolution.
the finances, and yeah,
Yeah, all the finances and child support and such. I mean, you might get something out of the child support one through the family law versus DCSS. But the fact is, once you get a chance to watch one of these custody ones or domestic violence ones for restraining orders, you're going to see how they actually are violating the law, abusing their discretion. You get names, case names of these people. I just honestly think that all of us should be taking note of every single one that you find. Here's a name of the case. Here's the case number. Boom. That's in a database, and that eventually will be able to get brought up to legislation, or hell, I don't know. You know what I mean? Taking it
yeah,
some taking it somewhere. I don't think that in California, I don't think that any of those local news channels are really going to report any of this crap at all. You know, I mean,
no, no. In my experience, I don't think. Yeah, yeah. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, there's definitely a handful of people like who you named fighting for that legislative change, and I think that's something that certainly needs to happen.
yeah,
But this almost comes down to uh, gun laws, for example, right? They
yes,
can they can keep making more gun laws, but if the people breaking the gun laws, well, they're criminals, so they don't follow laws. So does making more gun laws work? We have laws on the books like due process, right?
yeah, yeah,
These judges regularly completely dismiss. In fact, the last two trials I had, they completely dismissed due process at least once, if not multiple times. So, yes, we do need some legislative change. Glad we have people fighting for that. But,
yeah,
and I think that's what led to us wanting to start this podcast is we need to expose what's really happening out there. We have certainly a lot of parents going through these family courts who have their own experiences, but there's a lot of our population that doesn't understand what's going on in these courts. So I think that's good advice, that you have for people to just get online and watch one or two of these hearings and see what
yeah,
they're doing.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. You
it's
touch,
it's certainly a problem that needs to be addressed.
yeah,
And although yes, more laws could help, we need to find out a way to hold these courts accountable to
accountable.
making legal and lawful orders. Um,
Yes,
this,
yeah. The
there
accountability
needs
is the big thing, right?
there needs to be accountability for the judges, and there's clearly not.
Yeah,
They have immunity. There's I've certainly researched a few backdoor ways of trying to go after them, but man, good luck trying to get any of that to stick. Their immunity is not qualified immunity like law enforcement, and it probably should be.
yeah, yeah. And you can, they've said you have this recourse you go through with the CJP. Yeah, so what is that? The Commission on Judicial Performance. And I truly believe they don't take any action against any of these judges whatsoever. That's just my experience. I'd like to talk to some people who have reported to the CJP, because I mean, I just don't think anything's getting done for anybody puts a complaint out there about a judge. I just honestly don't. If you do put a complaint out to the bar association about an attorney, that's interesting is that they'll call you back about it. They'll state that they are making a move to the attorney to basically ask the attorney to go do what they're supposed to do. But the funny thing is, I don't hear anybody being like, "Oh, you're you're removed from the bar," or like for judges and such, some type of misconduct has to be penalized. So I don't ever hear that ever happening.
Yeah.
There, Susan Bassey has at least shown that there have been only a couple that those were taken. They were taken to the highest level. So we're not talking the bar association did a damn thing. What
Yeah.
happened was they got took to federal court. Okay. And it's like that's the level you have to go if you want to go and put this real complaint that has factual evidence behind it, and it's all good substantial evidence. That seems like the way to go. Forget the board. Sorry, the yeah, forget the bar association. Forget the CJP. I think they're just all trying to protect their own and those
Yeah.
types of things. Honestly.
I remember a story recently I was reading. It was about a sheriff, I believe it was. I want to say Oklahoma, something like that. And basically, there was a judge that was way stepping outside of their lane and what they were legally, allowed to do. And he went after the sheriff for, I think it was talking too loudly in the hallway outside his courtroom.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
if I remember right, forcing him to texting him, telling him he needed to be in his courtroom that day, and he's like, look, I got work to do. I'm busy. What's this about? What's going on? And it really seemed like an ego trip from the judge. And the sheriff had to eventually get an attorney, and it became a big thing here. And I think it was after a year, he said that he filed a complaint against that judge, against clearly a different state, but they're going to have their own board for handling judicial mistakes or judges that are violating the law.
Uh-huh.
And after a year and going through that process, I think they said something along the lines of they handled it, but they didn't tell them what they did. They didn't tell them what the punishment was, if there was any punishment. They just kind of acknowledged, okay, thank you for bringing this to us. Have a good day. And so,
Thanks
for
for
all
the
we know, there was
information.
no consequences there.
Man,
Yeah.
sick folks. Okay, that's interesting. Well, I know I want to go back to what you said about you started talking about gun rights. Well, I want to make sure that we bring this up into another video because we want to touch base on the Second Amendment rights that are actually they're trying to strip Second Amendment rights from Americans. This is
Well,
this is
well, hold on,
really
hold on,
happening.
hold on. They're not trying to. They are.
Well, they are okay.
They are using. They
You know
are
what I
using
mean?
these They are using these family courts as a backdoor way of pushing,
It's a
of
good,
taking away people's Second Amendment rights
yeah, absolutely.
without any due
It's a
process,
mechanism.
without even accusing anyone of committing a crime, and they're taking away their constitutional
Yeah,
rights. And
absolutely.
this, and not just the Second Amendment. We'll get that. That's certainly probably going to be its own episode all on its own. There
Yeah,
is the silver bullet and these protective orders and the
yeah,
abuse of those. And maybe that'll be our next one here. I think that's probably one of the most important topics, at least pertaining to our cases.
yeah. Yeah, I want to take a real deep dive into restraining orders. And like I had discussed a little earlier, mentioned about, hey, watch some of these hearings, get names, get case numbers, um, because I've done this already myself, and I got a collection of these different names that associate with these with these case numbers. And, I got a chance to hear out some of the arguments, and I'm just baffled how they got restraining orders against them for nothing. I mean, really, it was, we want to be honest, it was like, you can't really be serious. You're gonna flip somebody's life upside down, you know, for some minute thing that, this one guy who went into the work locker room just to go look at a girl's phone. Um, he wanted to see if she was being texted by somebody and then put it back. And then, you know, that's just the allegation, but he simply stated, I wasn't trying to take her phone or nothing like that. It was in my locker. It doesn't matter. It's like we're talking about somebody who looked at a phone and you would have flipped their life upside down. Are you fucking kidding me?
Well, the key point to what you said there is that was the accusation.
The
And
accusation.
this comes back to that whole topic at the beginning here, this abuse of discretion.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
one thing to be accused of something, and it's another thing to have clear evidence of wrongdoing by
Yeah.
someone. And these courts continually make these rulings, from what I've seen on testimony. It's almost like these
Yeah.
judges
Testimony.
in these trial courts, in my experience, it's almost like they view this evidentiary standard as preponderance of testimony. There only has to be testimony that you've done something wrong, and we'll take your child away. We'll take away your constitutional rights. We'll flip your life upside down. We'll try to make you go homeless.
Right. Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Um, yeah, so that whole, like, getting the names and the cases of these, I even went to the court in my county. I have to go to the court if I want to see what any of those documents are, even my own. I can't see them online. I got to actually go physically into the court to look at on the register of action to see what actually was filed, and so I can see, everything. And that's generally only anything that's on the record. This is the part that we have to be careful about, is what's on the record, is that if you file any kind of exhibits, um, where I'm at, it's you file a lodgment, a notice of lodgments, that's your exhibits, label them out, but those get handed back to you after the case is over. They don't go get put into the record. And
Yeah.
therefore, you don't get to see any of those if you do try to pull those up into the register of actions. So, I don't know, I'm going to this subject here, but be careful of what you do put on the record, because if there is any personal information that you don't need the entire public to see, then don't put that onto a lodgment. File that just with your declaration, and then that way it's I'm sorry, opposite. What you don't want put on the record, you would put that into a lodgment, and that, to which I think is important to the case, and it can be public, that you would file in your declaration. But yeah,
Yeah.
the point was that you can go into look at the register of actions and see what these guys actually went through in their cases, and like, damn, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
The,
that's some good advice. That, like you said, this is all public. So man, you got to be careful what you submit in there, because anyone could go do some digging and see it.
yeah, yeah,
So you don't want to
absolutely.
put too personal of information onto the record there. But at the same time, sometimes they almost force you to try to do that just to try to prove your case. Um,
Yeah,
so it's certainly something to juggle.
that is true. So,
Well,
let's see. What
sure.
else we wanted
Well,
to
there's
go
a third
through?
topic. There was a third topic here, but in
Okay.
hindsight, I think I want to do some more research on that one. That one is kind of a sensitive one. It's kind of a big one.
Oh
If
yeah.
uh, if what I've been told is true, it's something that everyone needs to know about. It's so let's do a little more research on that third topic before we bring that up because I don't want to go out there saying things that are not true.
Okay. No, I mean that's good. Um, I mean I could even still stay on the last subject you had there with I mean everything to do with the just the way that the courts are okay. I want to discuss this since okay, we're going to talk about the way that the courts themselves, their business offices are mishandling um the job of the court. To which I still need to look up more on the actual statutes of law on this because I mean the court's got to be held responsible legally for anything that's done illegally. I would, that's got to be a fact, right? I mean, I can't see that they screw something up. Oh, it's just a slap on the wrist, and I'm sorry, we'll fix it. I
Yeah,
I don't know that that is a legal thing, but I like to think it is illegal if they do something of that sort. Um, you know, even if it is accident. But so one of the problems that dealing with down here I don't like is the that whole issue with the minute order. And the minute order is not being you know it's not being documented correctly. So they're producing a minute order with the date of the actual hearing versus the date that they actually file it on the record, which goes into the register of actions. You need to protect your rights with this minute order. It is pertinent to any type of contest you do with the appellate court, Supreme Court, let alone your what's that motion for reconsideration? You know,
yeah,
anything you go forward with, that's an important date because that's the notice you were given on the date that you were then notified as the ruling. The court date hearing you were in is not. That's just what was vocally said. That doesn't mean shit. When it's on paper, it's been filed with the court. That's when it means something.
yeah. Especially because in your situation where you don't have access to uh, reliable court reporters or court reporters that are cost effective in some way, you know.
Yeah.
So when you don't have a court reporter, yeah, that minute order is the um, only part of the record that you have kind of written down. Um, for me, because I have court reporters, at least up till this point, that that's not as much of an issue for me. But that stems from your inability to get court reporters to document what's happening on the record so that you can appeal it.
And that actually that's coupled too. That's coupled to the problem. Like you said, yes, the transcript thing is one thing, right? Because you need to do that or you need to have that in order to go on to the anything with the appellate court. But just as well as it's the minute order, which is important because it's what the date states that you're appealing from. You
Yeah.
know, I have this date is when I have a deadline now to the next movement. If
Uh-huh.
you did it, you know how like you have a motion for reconsideration, you got 10 days from the date of the filing and the notice of the orders.
Mhm.
So that's also important. And you have to
Yeah.
like, and we got to be able to enforce that with the courts. But if they put the wrong date on there, then you got to try to fix that. So that's what I'm going through, and I'm reaching out to the executive office of the Supreme Superior Courts. They're not responding at all, and this has been multiple times I've tried to reach out to them. Now I sent them a letter, in writing. So now I'm going to see like, all right, do I get a response that way? Well, we'll see.
Yeah, and that's although I haven't had that particular issue, I did have an issue with my case with a clerical error that was done when filling out paperwork by likely the court clerk, and in the process of trying to get that clerical error brought to their attention, you're not met with someone who's eager to help. You're met with someone who, in my situation, just accused me of not being happy with the how the ruling went,
Hmm.
which
Yeah,
the particular clerical error was something that both parties agreed on, and either the judge or the court clerk wrote the wrong thing onto the form,
yeah,
and I went through trying to talk to everyone, and just all I had to do, I eventually just had to file a motion and attack it that way. There's certainly no easy way to deal with clerical error with any of the clerks or the head clerk or anything like that. They don't
yeah.
they're not there to help it from what I can tell.
No, yeah, yeah. They don't seem like they're there to help anyone, and their supervisors. Uh, I don't think that those supervisors know anything of what they're talking about anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. Yeah. What in the hell? Okay. Well, I'll have to do this later.
Well, it was good talking to you, man. I think
Yeah.
this was a good talk. I think we're gonna have some good topics here for some upcoming episodes. Um, and
Yeah.
certainly, I think we could talk for hours, but we'll keep this simple to start here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we'll go from there.
Yeah, we'll put some links together as well to go to for any listeners there that want to further educate or just even like take even some extra steps. Anyone that's also want to advocate to trying to make the changes, going to be getting some. There already is some actual links that can already start this process right now, and that's through the bills that we're trying to actually get passed. But yeah, it was. I think we'd want to give some people just information. We'll uh, set that out there, and we'll schedule another video.
Yeah, let's do it. I can't wait.
Sounds good. All right.
All right, take it easy.
Well, to the fathers.